everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the SafeHouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the SafeHouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. Every day, we're inundated with news about cyber threats from all kinds of organizations around the globe and individuals that are threat actors. But do we really see or think about the internal threats that we have? That's what we're going to delve into today. And we're very fortunate to have a subject matter expert with us, Kyle Schlosser. Welcome to the Safe House.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for having me. I'm really excited to talk about insider threats with you.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and kind of give them your journey to get to where you are today, how you got involved in all this threat, the insider threats.
Definitely. So I had a bit of an informal start into cybersecurity. Originally, I both studied and worked in emergency management and public safety. And when I was studying and working in emergency management, the hot topic was cybersecurity. And, the more that it came up in conversation, I started to get a little bummed out that I didn't decide to study cybersecurity in college. So I figured the best way to get exposure to it would be finding an opportunity to work in it. And I was fortunate enough to find a company that was just starting to build out their cybersecurity program. And they had originally hired me to build and manage response plans for cyber attacks. But I was just very fortunate that, it was the beginning stages of the security program. And I ended up getting exposure to all aspects of a cybersecurity program. And then wasn't until maybe a few years in that I really found an interesting passion, which is insider threat management. And that's what I've continued to do ever since then.
You now establish programs around the whole insider threat. So can you kind of sketch out what a program would look like, or how do you go about kind of getting your hands around the whole insider threat issue?
So if you're interested in starting out an insider threat program, I think the first thing that you should do is the next time you log into your work computer, think about the damage that you could do, whether it's intentional or maybe unintentionally, with the access that your company's entrusted you with. I think at any firm, especially in a very competitive market, there's always going to be a risk for insider threats. We're trusting employees to use their access responsibly, but that's not always how it works out. And sometimes you'll find employees and contractors who are intentionally doing things that violate your standards and policies, and they're doing things with malicious intent. But there's other insiders that do a lot of risky things that unintentionally. They may be cutting corners, or they may not be familiar with the right way to go about doing things, and as a result, they're introducing an unnecessary amount of risk to your environment. So the main objective for an insider threat program is to watch how your employees and your contractors are using their access, and making sure that they're not doing anything that's going to harm your company's reputation, revenue, brand. It's really just making sure that everybody you've delegated access to is using their access appropriately.
So let me confirm one thing, and then I have a question for you. So third parties are considered part of the insider threat community, correct?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And to go back on what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So if you look at like a security operations center, their main objective is preventing outsiders from getting into the company. But with an insider threat program, your focus is going to be watching what the people with access to your environment are doing. And, that could come in the form of maybe a contractor coming in for 3 weeks to help out with a project, or maybe a senior executive that's been with the company for 20 years. Whoever it is, as long as they have access to your environment, it's important to watch them just to make sure that they're not introducing unnecessary amount of risk.
Is it possible that your SOC could actually turn the view inward and monitor the flow of traffic, things of that nature, and see if there's oddities that way?
Yeah, they definitely have capabilities to identify abnormal behavior. The SOC specialty is really identifying like when malware is introduced and there's
Yeah.
abnormal web traffic, being detected. That's the kind of stuff that they're really honed in on. And what I found is that a SOC and an insider team, they're always going to be working closely together. There's a lot of capabilities that an insider team can provide in a security investigation, and there's a lot of security capabilities that a SOC can provide on an insider investigation. So they really go hand in hand. There is some overlap, but two different objectives.
All right. So with your program, we got the unintentional and we have the intentional, right? The malicious. So let's break that apart for a second. Can you take us into what do you do in the program to get to the unintentional and to avoid that? What are the elements of a program to improve your stance there?
Well, if you have a budget and the interest in starting an insider threat program, there's specialized tooling that you can use to help you detect malicious types of insider behavior in real time. And that's really helpful. I think, the experience that I have is companies don't understand the need for an insider program until you actually start catching insider threats. So
Uh, uh,
the way that I went about this and the way my team went about this was we began leveraging tools that were not built for insider threat detection. They were mostly infrastructure tools that reported on endpoint performance and behavior, email logging tools, things like that
mm,
we could use or repurpose to identify abnormal behavior. And then once you start catching some serious incidents and your executives or your legal team or your HR team sees that there's a lot of value an insider threat program could provide,
mhm.
that's when you can start looking, if you're not able to already, that's when you can really start looking at some of these purpose-built tools that are pretty much out of the box able to detect risky insider behavior.
Okay, so really, you don't know if somebody's unintentionally, they're not being malicious, just unintentional. So it's just you have a white canvas where something blips up, and it's like, oh, we have to investigate. Is that it's unintentional or it's intentional? So you said that you had some tools that you used, not purpose built, but tools. So why don't you talk about that, how you kind of developed those and had discovered those in the earlier days of your journey?
Yeah, so as you start to catch, abnormal behavior, if you want to get a complete picture of what's going on, there's always going to be tools, especially in infrastructure, that may allow you to see like what meetings the person's been on, what applications they have on their computer, what times they're using their computer, what emails they're sending. But the issue that you will encounter, and this is an issue that may lead to you purchasing some purpose-built insider
Mm.
threat tools, is that you can identify abnormal behavior through non-insider tools, but it's really hard to identify, is this intentional or unintentional? The only way to really go about that without the right tools is to directly confront the user and try and get an understanding of what's happening. But if you can get the right tools that show you all the context you need leading up to the abnormal events, then you can build out your investigation without any user interaction and get a complete, story for your legal team or your HR team or security.
So, what were those tools that you used early on? And then by name, can you tell us some of the purpose-built tools?
The tools that I was using early on, we had a tool called NextThink, which reported on endpoint health. We had some email security products that were logging emails being sent and received. And then we also had a few Cisco products that allowed us to look into the types of calls people were having. Were they having calls with a competitor outside of business hours? Were they having interviews on their computer. This is all kind of stuff that'll help you build a picture of something abnormal or risky that's happening.
Yeah. And so the purpose-built tools, and what do they do? Just as examples, trying to get flair for our audience so they say, oh, I think we have that in our shop.
Yeah, if I could recommend one purpose-built DLP tool or insider risk tool, it would be a tool called Insider Threat Management by Proofpoint. And
Hmm.
basically what that does is it's an agent that sits on endpoints, whether they be physical laptops or virtual machines or servers, and it's basically logging everything that is happening on that computer. But what Proofpoint does really well is differentiates between user-driven activity, which is what, an insider team is really concerned with, versus like just background processes that are, not user driven. That's more what a security operations team is going to be concerned with. So let's say I did something wrong and HR is asking an insider team to look at me. They're going to be able to see everything that I've been doing leading up to that report that HR made.
Ah,
So they'll be able to see, are they accessing systems or data they shouldn't be accessing? Are they having conversations with people they shouldn't be talking to?
yeah.
Are they moving a lot of your data into folders called, personal or taxes? That it allows you to take a complete thorough look back at a user and figure out what's going on.
So those would be used maybe later on if there's litigation potentially.
A tool like Proofpoint Insider Threat Management will be used, regularly. You can use it to generate alerts on predefined behavior. You can use it to audit access to sensitive systems or data. It's a kind of a Swiss Army knife for DLP and insider risk. And another big benefit of this tool, I don't work for Proofpoint and I'm not trying to sell this for them. This is just, what we've found a
Yeah.
lot of success with, but it's really helpful for security operations too. If they want to confirm that somebody accidentally clicked a phishing link or they're investigating some behavior that they can't tell if it's user driven or just a background process that's occurring, they'll reach out and ask for help in looking into it. And your insider tools will give you a good look back at what the user's been doing on their computer over the last 30 days, 90 days, or
Yeah.
120.
So, do you have any stories that how you found someone, whether it be intentional or unintentional, how you interceded, how you remediated and contained the problem, and what the outcome was?
Definitely. And if it's okay, I mean, there's been some recent, really interesting
Yeah.
updates in the news about insider events that I could share as well.
Yep.
There's one fairly recent. There's a company called Security Scorecard where they
Hmm.
just filed an SDNY complaint against one of their competitors and former employee. And what happened was this former employee took a bunch of their data over to a competitor, and it was data that Security Scorecard uses to generate revenue. So they were upset about that. But as they looked into the issue further, they found that this competitor was hosting mock interviews with some of the other Security Scorecard employees, trying to
Yeah.
get them to reveal trade secrets and other, sensitive information on how Security Scorecard runs. So that's definitely an interesting one that I'm keeping track of. I think just reading from the SDNY complaint, they detected this after it happened, and
Mm.
they're a smaller company, but they're exploding right now. They're a great company.
Yeah.
But I think, without the insider or DLP capabilities, you're always going to catch this stuff after the fact. But if you had an insider program in place with the right tools, you would have been able to see these interviews happening with the competing firm, and you would have been able to see other indicators that would let you know, hey, something's not right with this team or with this
Yeah.
individual, and you can put a stop to it before they ever move to take data.
Didn't she like do a download of the customer list, things of that nature, about 3 weeks before she left? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, and so like if you're looking at that through an insider tool,
Yeah.
you're probably gonna see them researching the competing firm, which isn't always abnormal for somebody in sales, but
Yeah.
it's something you want to keep in the back of your mind. You'd
Yeah.
probably see a lot of off hours meetings with them, or some discreet emails like, hey, let me text you on my cell or call my personal. You would be able to collect enough to at least go to legal or HR and say, hey, something isn't looking right here, and we may want to address this further. But if you don't have those capabilities in place, you can't really keep an eye on how your employees or how your contractors are
Yeah.
handling your data. You can't tell what their intent is, and
Yeah.
it's going to result in people leaving with your data.
Interesting. What about your in your background, the things that you've gotten your hands dirty on?
The industry that I have experience in it's definitely a highly competitive market, and it's also kind of an incestuous business where employees are just kind of going from competing firm to competing firm. My experience is, we deal with a high volume of data loss. People are always motivated to take data to a competitor when they're leaving your firm.
Hmm.
But we've also got a lot of fraudulent behavior, really anything that you could think of. I mean, people misusing company funds, people paying other people to do their work for them. We had one instance where we caught an individual who was paying some people in India to do their work for them at like $5 an hour or something, and this person was making quite a bit of money. So
Oh my
you never
God.
really know. I think with work from home or even a hybrid model, or it doesn't matter where the employee's working from. I think as long as there's an opportunity to do something wrong, the potential of somebody taking advantage of it is always there.
Yeah, that's a good point. With everybody, not everybody, but a huge shift in the last 3 or 4 years, people working out of their homes. Has this become a bigger problem?
Yeah, there's actually a
Yeah.
trend out there right now. I think it's called overemployed. And this was something that I always enjoyed finding, was when you have employees working remotely that are working multiple full-time jobs remotely at once. And I'm sure it's happening at almost every single company. It's all over TikTok, and it's
Huh.
been popular for quite a while, but there are people out there that get hired just to add another full-time job into their list so they can make a lot more money. And we would catch that quite a bit. We
Hmm.
had a few techniques on how to identify that behavior.
Did you see the latest? It just happened yesterday. This is July 24th. We're recording this today with you, and but I read yesterday about Know Before. You see that situation where they hired a North Korea. They didn't. Their vetting process was probably a bit lax. They hired a North Korean hacker. As soon as they onboarded with their computer, they sensed and they detected a malware being loaded immediately, and they were able to contain it. So, kudos to them for containing so quickly and eliminating the damage. But then also their openness to share with the world, to how they did it, and they got caught, and that their vetting process and their hiring need to be improved. Any thoughts on that?
Well, one, I think it's great that Know Before disclose this, because it's hard for other companies to learn when we're not sharing examples like this. So
Yeah.
I know I haven't ever encountered anything that extreme personally, but I know that it is a huge risk, and I know that it's something that companies security teams are getting very concerned with, especially with AI. I
Mm.
saw another example. I can't remember the threat research firm that pulled the report on this, but they found a few fake, I think they were North Korean job applicants who were using AI it was basically a fake person that the interviewer was talking with, but they're getting very crafty, and it's always going to be easier for them to get hired, and for a company to give them the access willingly than it is to try and break into a company. So
Yeah.
even if a threat actor isn't like trying to get hired at a company themselves, there's still a lot of motivation for them to reach out to employees at firms and say, hey, I'll give you $15,000 if you give me your username and password and help me
Yeah.
out with the MFA challenge. So I think they're getting very creative on how they get into companies, especially as security capabilities improve. So,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
an insider threat program would be a great defense to, detecting if, somebody with bad intentions gets into your company. That's why the insider team is there to try and figure that out.
So, Kyle, in your experience, before you had an official insider program and without the custom or the purpose-built tools to your most recent experience, are there early red flags that you look for or have discovered that say, okay, something doesn't feel right here. Let's get on this.
Yeah, and I think for every industry, there's going to be different indicators. I'm sure there are some that are common across the board, but if you don't have the tools at your disposal to help you identify insider threats in real time,
Hmm.
the trick that we found was that you need to understand where your high risk departments are.
Hmm.
If there's people with incentive to take data to a competing firm, you should be always looking at the competing firms and looking at what jobs have been posted and who's getting hired where, and just start to familiarize yourself with the companies that, there's a possibility your data may end up at. And then once you have that understanding and you know who your high risk employees are, you can
Mm.
start to focus on them a little more and not spy on them, but just make sure you're auditing their activity thoroughly so that if you do see them, sending emails to an address that just doesn't make sense, it doesn't line up with their peers, you
Yeah.
may want to look at that. Or if you see them all over Workday jobs, you may want to look at that. Another thing that is always really helpful to do is just stay very close with your HR team because they're going to be super close to understanding which departments are struggling. Not every department is going to be running happily. Eventually, there'll be some turbulence and people get upset, and so it's always good to stay close with your HR team because they're going to be very helpful in letting you know where you should be directing your focus.
Well, you said something very interesting about spying. Do people feel that when you set up a program like this, they feel like you're spying on them and they start to behave differently?
The issue of it being misunderstood as spying will
Yeah.
inevitably come up. There will be people, especially as they see what, specialized tools can do, that it'll be a concern. I think to address that concern, you have to really open your tools up to auditing, random auditing, to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that people are being held accountable for, or your analysts are being held accountable for how they're using the tools. But also, one thing that you want to work to make sure that everybody understands is that your tools are collecting so much data, and if you set them up the right way, it's going to alert you to the abnormal behavior. You're not going to have to
Got it.
target anybody, or you're not going to be, singling people out. And then a lot of these tools have been built specifically to address these concerns. So they'll mask usernames and IDs so that you can find people doing things they shouldn't be. It's hard to tell who they are, but once you get approval from HR legal to look into it a little further, you can unmask the IDs and start to do a little bit of a deeper investigation. But I think, especially with some of the experiences that I've had catching really nasty behavior, that's usually the employees or contractors' first thing is saying, well, you were spying on me. And we weren't spying on you. Your behavior just triggered alerts that we looked into and we recorded the evidence and passed it along to legal and HR. So I think people are surprised with what information is getting collected on these cases. They are still in the belief that the only thing that they're going to get in trouble for is sending data home, using their work email. But these tools, DLP tools and insider threat tools have just gone way, way beyond that. Now you can see how people are using their browser extensions. Are they sharing files over Bluetooth or their home network? Are they, sharing their screen with a competitor they shouldn't be? Are they installing remote access tools? Once people start to hear that employees are getting in trouble for this type of behavior, it really does spread throughout the office, and people start to think a little more before they go and do something they know they shouldn't.
So if our audience doesn't, people in our audience do not have a program or probably don't have the budget, for instance, what are some of just the MacGyver or just the survival techniques you would suggest?
One thing I would suggest is, even if you don't have the budget for it, reach out to an insider threat company like Proofpoint and just get an idea for what their tools can catch, because you may not be able to justify the expense of buying a tool right now, but at least it'll give you some ideas on things that Proofpoint tracks, and maybe you have a way to track it differently through some of your existing tools. So it doesn't hurt to meet with a company like Proofpoint and just kind of see how they're building out their insider threat detection capabilities. And it may give you some ideas on things you can do with the tools you have at your disposal.
So if you had one thing to offer our audience that they could do today to improve their overall security and safety, what would that one thing be?
If there was one thing that I could suggest, and I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but it would just be putting yourselves in the shoes of your peers or your employees, and thinking about what kind of damage they could do with the access that they've been entrusted with, whether it's intentional damage or unintentional damage. And then once you'll get some ideas and you'll start thinking about some high risk areas. And then once you have an idea for that, go start auditing, activity in those areas regularly, maybe looking at any kind of logs that your systems or tools are producing. There's a chance that there is a capability there for you to review activity and identify abnormal behavior.
Kyle, it's been a real pleasure having you on the Safe House. I really appreciate your contributions, and welcome back anytime.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the SafeHouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the SafeHouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen, or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org, or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.